Today on Ancient DOS Games, we're taking a look at Zargon, a shareware platformer that had a unique look and sound for its time, but could have used some more time in QA. Now don't get me wrong, the game isn't bad, but it doesn't really stand out very well either. It's one of those average games, you know the kind, where you play it for a little, say to yourself that you play it some more later on, but then never really do. It probably didn't help either that the game was likened to another game called Jill of the Jungle, which came out a year before from the same company. But it is still a different game with a different look and feel, and we'll go over those aspects, but first let's dive into the game stats. Zargon was released by Epic Mega Games in 1993 and is a one-player run-and-gun platformer. It features VGA 320x200 256 color graphics and only supports Sound Blaster sound effects and music. As for its release date, Zargon was made freeware by the game's programmer Alan Pilgrim in August of 2008. I'm not really sure how widespread the full version is by now, but a good place to get it, and a place I seem to be continually recommending, is the RGB Classic Games website at www.classicdosgames.com. So as you might expect, there is a story to the game which is told through journal entries you find scattered around on the overworld maps, and through dialogue cutscenes with an eagle named Silvertongue. Basically, you play the role of an archaeologist by the name of Malvinius Haversham, who ends up being whisked away to some mysterious world while investigating some ancient ruins in Madagascar, and thus follows an epic fetch quest to retrieve numerous power objects, and to destroy the reactors powering the creations of an evil entity known as Zargon, which effectively means that the villain got top billing in this game. Well, I guess that's what happens when your lead protagonist has a much longer and harder to pronounce name. Now, the game's actually split across 3 different volumes: Beyond Reality, The Secret Chamber, and Zargon's Fury. Before the full game was free, Beyond Reality was the shareware volume you could share with other people, and the last 2 volumes are the registered versions you paid for. Curiously though, the credit screens for the second and third volumes both say the game is shareware and that you should share it with other people. You'd think the development team would have caught that. I also find it curious that Malvinius wears different colors of clothing in all 3 volumes. Maybe just to remind you what volume you're playing or something. Each volume also seems to have its own design theme going on. The first volume basically introduces you to just about every enemy in the game, and every kind of obstacle you'll run into, but keeps the level layout simple and the enemy counts manageable. In fact, there's only 2 enemy respawn points in the entire first volume, both in the same general area. The second volume introduces very tiny enemies that are difficult to deal with, and the platforming is a bit more difficult. And the third volume is all about design traps and having to take advantage of the layouts of the levels before they take advantage of you. The gameplay itself is fairly standard. You walk around on an overworld map to reach various platforming levels where the real meat of the game is. The platforming levels range anywhere from easy to insane in terms of difficulty, but you get unlimited lives, so at first death will seem like nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But death also means starting a particular level all over again, and when the levels get more complex and you happen to die just a few feet from the exit, yeah, you're gonna wish you could just go back out and save your game for later. Well, what I mean is, you're able to save your progress, but only on the overworld map, which means if you go into a level without saving, you won't get another chance to save until you clear the level. Oh, fun. As for surviving the waves of enemies you come across, you can obtain 3 different weapons: lasers, rocks, and fireballs. Lasers are your standard means of attack, and whenever you begin a level, you're limited to firing only 1 laser bolt at a time, but you can pick up power-ups to increase this number all the way to 5. You can also guide your lasers up and down slightly by pushing up and down on your controls. Fireballs are the most powerful weapon you can obtain, but you only get them in very limited quantities, usually packs of 5, but you can spend a few emeralds to buy just one if you absolutely need one for a given situation. And then there's the rocks. The rocks are almost worthless. I mean, they're affected by gravity and bounce around, so you can potentially hit things with them that aren't almost directly in front of you, but they move very slow, they're hard to aim, you generally don't find that many, which means you have to wait for previously thrown rocks to clear the screen before you can throw more, and you can't buy more of them with your emeralds, and once you have a rock, you cannot switch back to your lasers, even if you have multiple lasers. So yeah, the game has some frustrating aspects like that. It also doesn't help that I had to replay most of the third volume because of a particular bug that can sabotage your progress by removing gate keys and power objects you'd recently obtained. I don't have any idea what triggers this bug, but it basically prevents you from progressing forwards on the overworld. I think it has something to do with how the game resets your inventory when you die, because generally you have to die in order to trigger this bug. My recommendation is, before you begin a level, check your inventory and make absolutely sure any gate keys or power objects you recently obtained are still there. Then save. The game is thankfully forgiving in other areas though. Firstly, you can collect fruit as you progress, and 16 pieces of fruit will refill 1 point of health. However, if you grab your 16th piece of fruit while at full health, you end up keeping it, and the moment you lose any health, you immediately use your fruit to get that health back. So it's kind of like making your health bar 1 unit longer. Also, by pressing B at any time at all, except for on the overworld map, you can access a store with 6 very useful items you can buy. Health points, lasers, rapid fire, which basically just turns your lasers red and maxes the quantity out at 5, a single fireball, a pack of 5 fireballs, or temporary invincibility. Since you can only have a maximum of 99 emeralds at a time, I recommend you... Oh wow, look at that message which just showed up at the bottom while I was waiting for that platform. I know the game has numerous messages that can show up when you just stand around doing nothing. Some of them are self-promotional, encouraging you to buy the full version of Zargon or to check out other games made by Epic. But that is a clear and blatant strike against Apogee, Epic's main competition during the early days of shareware. I don't know about you, but that just seems kinda low for a shareware developer. Though it makes me wonder if Apogee ever did such a thing against Epic. Anyways, as I was saying, since you can only have a maximum of 99 emeralds at a time, I recommend that if you ever enter a level that doesn't force you to use rocks and you have at least 80 something emeralds, buy an extra laser immediately. That way you'll effectively double your firepower for the entire level. I also recommend you avoid buying health points if you can, because when you clear a level, your health is restored to maximum anyways, and each level is generally full of healing power-ups, be them the fruit or hearts. There's actually a few other things you can come across that you can't buy in the store. The Zybox shoes, for example, let you jump higher, and if you pick up several of them in the same level, you can end up jumping like 50-something thousand feet in the air. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but still. Or for those of you looking to make high scores, there's the Epic Billiard Balls, E, P, I, and C, and if you collect them in the correct order, you get a bonus of 4,000 points. You can also find underwater pods, which will let you travel underwater and up waterfalls safely, which is good since Malvinius is about as allergic to water as Simon Belmont. And lastly, there's these strange vials of red liquid which turn you into a bee, basically allowing you to fly as high as you want for as long as you want. Also, even though you can't replay any of the levels, don't worry about missing the gate keys and power objects you need to progress. If you enter a level with any such items present, you won't be allowed to leave the level until you find them. Now here's an aspect of the game that is both forgiving and annoying: taking damage. Now most good games where you can only be hit a very limited number of times, you become temporarily invulnerable to damage when you get hit. This is commonly referred to as recovery time. In most bad games, recovery time is severely limited or completely absent, meaning you can lose all your health extremely quickly when you get attacked. But then there's Zargon, which does things a little differently and sort of succeeds and sort of fails in the process. When you take damage in this game, you become invulnerable to the thing which hurt you for as long as it continues touching you. Once you're no longer in contact, it can damage you again. In some cases, this can allow you to get out of the nasty situation or wait a brief moment to find the best avenue of escape. The trouble is that this formula is recalculated not only when the enemies move, but when you move as well. This means if you're moving away from enemies and enemy shots that are just touching an edge of you, they can hit you multiple times in a row because when you move, the game calculates that you're no longer touching said enemy, but then that enemy moves towards you in the same frame, ends up touching you again, and scores an extra hit. Generally speaking, the best thing to do if you're about to take damage is stand perfectly still. So long as you're standing still, anything that's guaranteed to move in one direction, at least for the time being, will only hit you once. If you move during this moment, you could be hit twice or more. Well, for the most part, that's all I really have to say about Zargon. It's not a complicated game by any means, but it can be a little frustrating at times. That said, the graphical design's pretty good, and the sound effects and music are rather unique and help give the game its own identity. Ultimately, it's an average game, worth trying at least once just for the heck of it. Just don't be surprised if you end up sending it to digital limbo as quickly as you downloaded it. So now let's talk DOSBox. This game's really easy to get working in DOSBox. Just set the cycles count to auto or max and you're good to go. You may want to keep the graphics scalers off though, since they don't really do much to help the look of the game. The one thing I will recommend is that if you're playing with a joystick or gamepad, remap all the buttons on that joystick or gamepad to keyboard controls and skip on using the game's built-in joystick support. This is because the in-game joystick support automatically repeats certain buttons, making it difficult to buy multiple items in one go or scroll to journal text at a comfortable speed. And with that said, this episode of Ancient DOS Games is concluded. Stay tuned for episode 19, where I'm going to be taking a look at one of the best and most feature-rich fighting games ever made, but it was released exclusively for DOS. Think you know which game that is? Send your guesses to adg@pixelships.com and check back next Saturday to see it in all its glory.